Welcome, Pradip Baijal. Mr. Baijal has written this book, A Bureaucrat Fights Back. It was first self-published because no publisher would touch it, and once you read it, you'll know why. You've retired now for the last 10 years,
That's right.
and it was really written, I think, in a way of explaining what had happened to you and to the telecom industry and how you had to fight in a situation which was not of your doing. But I'd like to start from the beginning. When Maran was appointed Minister of Telecom, there was a clear conflict of interest. Since he was a broadcaster, he owned Sun TV. Was there any discussion about that in the ministry or with the government or with Prime Minister Manmohan Singh?
Yes, there were occasional discussions where I did point out that there is a conflict of interest. And I remember the Prime Minister telling me that you are an independent body, so there is no, you're not under the minister, you're an independent body, so therefore there is no conflict. So then I didn't raise the issue after the Prime Minister told me this.
But this in your view was completely unethical.
Well, I was, you see, originally I was only the telecom regulator. It was only 1 year later that I was also appointed the broadcasting regulator. And I thought maybe the government doesn't know in the telecom department, because as broadcasting regulator I was reporting to Information and Broadcasting Ministry. So that's why I pointed out that I am one, and but I was told that no, since you are an independent authority, there is no conflict.
Mm-hmm. Now, Maran pressurized you to not give the unified services licensing recommendations which the NDA government had asked you to give. Maran said the government had changed, you refused and told him you have the order of the cabinet and you have to give the recommendation. Maran then threatened you that you will get into trouble. Manmohan Singh supported Maran on this, and he also warned you that you would get into trouble. You told him that Maran's instructions would lead to a big scam, which is what happened, and you refused. And also they predicted correctly that you did get into trouble.
Yes, but if I had listened to his instructions, two things could have happened. One, that no one would have got to know of the illegalities in 2G. Or second, I would have been in jail, because then it was entirely my responsibility that I did not give the recommendation, despite the fact that the cabinet had ordered that I give a recommendation.
So let's explain this a little bit. Your recommendations, which you had written for the new government, right? And what were those recommendations that Maran did not want in? He wanted to continue with the older ones, which suited him at this point.
Well, let me go from the beginning. When I joined, we had 10 million mobiles in the country, and we were growing at a rate of 0.2 million mobiles per month. At this point of time, if I recall right, China used to have 300 million mobiles, similar population. So I looked around, why is this happening? And I did a lot of due diligence. I went and met the regulatory authorities of England and of the United States, because these networks are the same, the machinery is the same, the nature of regulation is the same. And I found that there were several lacunae in our regulation. So I said, let's change the regulation, and I gave a recommendation to the government. That was November 2003. And by January 2003, Mr. Arun Shourie used to be my minister. He got everything completed, and the unified access service licensing was introduced in about January 2004. When I went to the cabinet said, no, this is not good enough. You go in stages. First you do UASL, Unified Access Service Licensing, and then you do USL, Unified Service Licensing, where you go further, because you can't change suddenly to a totally new regime. After January 2004, Arun Shourie was no longer my minister because UPA government came and Mr. Maran became my minister. And after some time, he started telling me there is no need for you to give the subsequent recommendation. I said, I have to give the subsequent recommendation because the cabinet has ordered it. He said, no, now this is a new government. So I said, either you give it in writing or I have to give the recommendation. So despite him and despite the Prime Minister also, I remember telling me once, I did give a recommendation after some time. Now, what would have been the problem if I had not given the recommendation? You see, when we gave the recommendation and UASL was adopted, it was adopted at a particular rate of spectrum. We went right up to the cabinet and cabinet said this is the rate of spectrum. So we went by a rate which was prevalent at that time and we wanted to grow the sector. So we went with this rate and new licenses were given, the technologies were merged. Now
To encourage growth.
to encourage growth.
And then your second recommendations, the rate was much higher.
No. There was no rate. The second recommendation, we said that you change over to a new regime.
Okay.
And that regime had parts A, B, C, D.
But explain to me, why did it benefit Maran to go with the old recommendation?
You see, when we started, we had 10 million mobile telephones. They were connected to some spectrum which we had sold to the companies. Now, between 2004 and 2006, the number of mobiles increased. So, the value of a line, of a spectrum line, which had 10 million phones connected or which had 200 million phones connected, the value of that line became different. So, therefore, in the second round, you should have had a higher rate. And it would have benefited Maran if he sold the spectrum at the old rate, which he did, which he ultimately did. Because the 2004 recommendations, 2005 recommendations that I had given, he kept them in an almirah and didn't bother about those recommendations and sold at the old rates. By the time he sold them at the old rates, the value of his spectrum had gone
Was he
up.
getting kickbacks because of those low rates?
I have written in my book that according to the report of an executive of the ED, the Enforcement Directorate, the rate was much higher, and the Enforcement Directorate report says that they have found Hawala transactions worth 10,000 crores. Subramaniam Swamy has also written a book, and he said the illegal money which was passed on was 60,000 crores. So that is the estimate, but that's not my estimate. But CAG has said that the loss by not auctioning was 1,76,000 crores. So perhaps that was the temptation not to change over to a new regime.
But couldn't he have gotten those kickbacks even with the higher rate?
Yes, even with the
With the new recommendations, he could have still gotten the kickbacks.
Well, the new recommendation was a totally new regime, and I don't know what the rates would have come, but the fact is that when the auctions did take place later, then the rate which came was 1,76,000 crores higher. But of course, they didn't take place in 2006, 2007. So rest is only an estimate.
I don't understand the logic, because if he was going to make money on the side, he could have made money anyway, even if he took your new recommendations.
No, the new recommendations were only that from excess licensing we go to a total licensing.
Okay.
And then the regime would have been different. The regime would
Then he
have
wouldn't
been,
have had a chance to take kickbacks.
Then on that regime, the wires would have been taken by one company, the mobile would have been taken by other company, the entire sector would have got divided into two, and what the resultant rates would have come later, I don't know what the resultant rates would have come. But there was a 2007 recommendation which said, okay, you want to give it at the old rates, So at least correct it for the market mechanics, because when we sold, when we allotted in 2004, there were, I said, 10 million mobiles connected to the spectrum, and later on today there are 1,000 million mobiles connected on this network. So what the value would have been, I don't know. But when the auctions did take place, I think auctions took place much later. They were 1,76,000 crores higher.
So when you were told by Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, as you've written in your book as well as spoken in interviews, that he mentioned to you that the minister is complaining about you not cooperating with him, and that you should cooperate, and he's warned you that you would get into trouble. Was there any further discussion where you told him that, listen, what he's doing is wrong, that you have to put the new recommendations?
Yes, I did tell him that the cabinet has ordered that I put in a new recommendation, so I can't not put in the new recommendation.
So what was Manmohan Singh's response?
Well, he said you should listen to your minister.
And not listen to the cabinet?
Well, he didn't say that.
His cabinet.
Cabinet was the previous government's cabinet. As a bureaucrat, I have to listen to any cabinet. So, but he said you should listen to the minister. Now, I don't know whether he understood the implications fully, because
he was an economist, you know, I mean, how can you say he could not have understood it?
I can't make a judgment. I have only written the facts in the book, that he said you must listen to the minister. But I have explained in the book later that all these issues were raised by the finance ministry before the Prime Minister, and there is a report
by Chidambaram,
by Mr. Pranab Mukherjee.
By Pranab Mukherjee wrote a letter, in fact, you've written in your
yes,
book.
He wrote a note to the Prime Minister's office that the finance ministry is not being consulted, and the files are getting lost, the papers are getting lost, and he is hell-bent on selling at the old rates, which he did, or allotting at the old rates.
So that letter was received by Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, and that
well,
too was ignored.
It's a note which reached the Prime Minister's office. It's not a letter. It's a note from the finance ministry to the Prime Minister's office, and at the bottom of the note they've written finance minister has seen.
So the point is that if you look at it, Manmohan Singh had full knowledge of what Maran was doing. We also know, it can be understood, and I wouldn't say it's a presumption, I think it can be understood that Manmohan Singh did not do things entirely on his own without the approval of Sonia Gandhi. So can we then understand that Sonia Gandhi also gave her approval to this?
Well, I am a bureaucrat and I have no access, and I am a bureaucrat and I am not in government, and I was not in government. I was in a body, independent body, a statutory body which was located outside. Now, what was happening in government, I cannot even guess. So, I don't know. But this I know very well, that from a layman's point of view, if there is an issue of a loss of 1 lakh crores, 50,000 crores, 60,000 crores, whether I have given my recommendation or not consulting the finance ministry is not possible. The finance ministry has to be consulted when the amount of money is so large. But he was able to steamroll and sell.
So he steamrolled Pranab Mukherjee, the finance minister.
At that
he
time,
steamrolled Chai.
No. At that time, Mr. Mukherjee was not the finance minister. Mr. Chidambaram was the finance minister. This report, when all the
so Chidambaram, in your book, you say that he was playing along with this also.
You see, he was finance minister, and though the finance ministry was sending letters that we have not been consulted, etc., etc., but he was not physically stopping what was happening. When the letter reached the Prime Minister's office also, but that reached much later when the entire controversy broke, because someone wanted to find out that what happened. And when we reply to these issues in Parliament, etc., etc., tell us what happened. So this letter is only a narration of what had happened in the government.
Okay.
And from that letter I understand that papers were going to the Prime Minister's office, papers were going to the finance ministry was not agreeing. Secretary Telecom was saying that finance secretary has not agreed, etc. But because Maran and later Raja were steamrolling the entire process, they were able to get away, finally selling, and that is why.
Are there discussions between you bureaucrats, between say the joint secretary or the secretary in telecom and finance ministry and with you? Did any of you discuss this amongst yourselves?
No. The telecom regulatory authority is a separate body. We have members. We
Yeah, आप मिलते तो होगे सबको.
नहीं.
So none of the discussions took place that what are these politicians doing?
This is not natural that we go to the ministry or we are called to the ministry. It is very rare that one is called. And when all this was happening, I was not the chairman tribe. All this happened after I left.
Okay, so now let's go to the point where Raja and Kanimori and all of them are now in big trouble. And you are basically not in the picture. Suddenly, you are brought into the picture. All right? 8 years later, when everything is finished, 8 years later, suddenly the Congress party starts an investigation through the CBI about what you did 8 years before. Can you take us through the moment when at 7 o'clock in the morning, the CBI arrived at your home? You were sleeping, you were in your pajamas, your family is asleep. What happened?
Well, there are many stages. First, around January 2010, I got a notice that I should appear in the CBI. And I went to the CBI. And the CBI told me that, look, here's a letter which you have written to the government. This letter does not have TRI approval. And you have changed your recommendation by this letter, and this letter is written by you. So I said, no, this is not possible. This cannot be written by me, because I was very particular in the Telecom Regulatory Authority that I did not do anything myself.
So that was a forged letter?
I'm coming to that. It had the approval of the authority, but those files were removed. And normally, as an authority, when I send the letter, I don't say that this has the approval of the authority. I'm sending a recommendation, and I don't say that this is the approval of the authority. But then when the detailed letters went 2-3 days later, my subordinates have always written this as the approval of the authority. In the second letter, my subordinate has clearly written that we have explained to you the position in the letter of 14th January 2004, and this has the approval of the authority. But when I went to the CBI, I was told there is no such letter.
So the Congress party seems to be a master at documents disappearing in the Ishrat Jahan case, in the Colgate case, and this.
Also in the CWG case.
CWG case, documents are missing.
Where the inquiry commission, I've read the report, where the inquiry commission went into the computers of CWG and discovered documents which had been deleted in the computer, because there is a technology which allows you to do that. So they went into the servers and they found that documents had been removed. In my case, the documents had been removed. Luckily for me, I had received my training in England on reforms and privatization, and one of my teachers, who later on became the regulator in UK, Professor Littlechild, he had said that, look, these are very dangerous jobs. Keep your key documents, because he was a very famous man, Professor Littlechild. But then he faced a lot of inquiries in UK, so he had warned me. So I kept all the important documents. Mr. Ashok Desai, who was the Attorney General, he also told me, you're going very fast, you will get into trouble. Keep all the documents. So I kept all
Ashok Desai
warned you that you are going very fast, you will get into trouble, because you are trying to play game theory. You are trying to play games with very big operators. Yes, I was trying to play games in order to bring the maximum efficiency in the network.
What kind of games?
You reduce the termination charge, you reduce the, you fix the tariff at one point.
So who would be the people placing obstacles in this?
Basically, in networks, the people who place obstacles are the incumbents at whichever stage. If MTNL, BSNL were incumbents, they were getting very high connectivity charges. When regulator comes in, he reduces the connectivity charges. So they are very unhappy. So all operators have take out a lot of rent in the network, and the rents reduce. So they are unhappy. So the first regulator also had very big problems because the MTNL and BSNL were very happy. In my case, when I joined, there were already 4 or 5 operators, 2 3 joined in addition on this network. So basically, the incumbents are very unhappy. So Ashok Desai told me that you keep all the documents. So because of these 2 people, I kept all the documents. So after the CBI told me there are no documents, I went home and I found the documents. So next day, I took all the documents, that here are the documents, and they must be there. So we looked around in other files with CBI, and in other files we got the documents. And how did we get the documents? Because in government, when you write a memo, you mark it to a lot of people. So they'll end up in different files. So we discovered all the files, documents there also, and I thought the case was over.
What level of people were questioning you?
DYSP and inspector. First inspector, then a DYSP.
Were they polite or rough?
Well, when you are questioned, you think that even the most polite person is very rude, but they were not very polite. They were not very polite. You see, I think in my case, everyone was gunning for Arun Shourie, and I was made a target because Arun Shourie is not an easy target. So I was made a target.
And he volunteered to the CBI
then,
to come and speak to them.
You see, then what happened was that when all this happened, I met Yashwant Sinha at a dinner party. And I said, sir, what is happening? He used to be the finance minister. I said, sir, what is happening? He said, don't bother. You are not the target. Arun is the target. And through Arun, NDA is the target. So go and meet Arun. So I rang up Arun Shourie's residence, and I found out that he lives in Lavasa now. So I rang him up in Lavasa. I said, what are you doing there? He said, I don't like Delhi, and now I'm in Lavasa. So I went to Lavasa, and I spent a lot of time with him, saw all the documents, etc., etc. He said, look, you will not be able to handle this, and all this happened in my supervision. So therefore, let me also handle this. Because what were they attacking? They were attacking my recommendation. But I had not taken action on that recommendation. The action was taken by the government. So I could have said very clearly, don't ask me.
But what is malified about a recommendation?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. That how can there be anything malified about a recommendation? But they said, look, you gave a malified recommendation and you made a fool of the government.
So all this was done to divert from Raja and Maran.
Yes, that's my impression, which I have said in the book. You see, if you go back, 2006 some cheap spectrum was sold, then 2007 and 8 some cheap spectrum was sold. Nothing happened. No one got to know. There were some minor noises. Then Subramaniam Swamy wrote a detailed letter to the Prime Minister that this has happened and you immediately take action. When no action was taken, as is typical of Subramaniam Swamy, he then he filed a PIL because he said government is not doing anything, so he filed a PIL. When you file a PIL, then everyone has to reply. So TRI also had to reply to the PIL, and that PIL stage came in early 2011. When TRI had to reply to that PIL, they said whatever we had done in 2003, 2004 was totally logical, was totally in order, and we are not to be blamed in 2003, 2004. Then they examined further. I am not concerned. I am only concerned with 2003, 2004. But despite that, CBI kept questioning. And when I told them that, look, there is an affidavit by TRI, you ask TRI, why are you asking me? But they kept asking me only.
So how many days did they interrogate you?
Well, they interrogated me on many, many days, many days. And then what you're telling me about their visit, then one day I found that there was a CBI raid on my house. That is the morning when these 5-6
So please
guys
describe
came.
it.
Well, that day I had a meeting in Bombay and I was going to Bombay, but they landed up at 7 before I left for Bombay. So I said, okay, you raid my house, I'm going. They said, no, you have to stay. So I stayed back. And they looked at all my documents. I have a bungalow office, though I had retired. And they looked at the documents, and after 2 hours, they said, yeah, to kuch nahi mila. So then they rang up their DIG. He said, yeah, kuch nahi mil raha hai. So कहीं और ढूंढो. So they stayed for another 2 hours. They actually sat, it was a small office, they found nothing, so they sat for another 2 hours. Then they rang up again that, sir, we got nothing at all. Okay, now you go to the lockers. So I said, why do you have to go to the lockers? Because there is no complaint of corruption. They said, no, DIG Sahib has said. So they went to the lockers. So my wife had 2 lockers and they went to both the lockers. As a matter of fact, they expressed surprise that my wife had so little jewelry because she's very fond of this Chandi wali jewelry. What is that called?
Silver jewelry.
Silver jewelry, because she doesn't like gold jewelry. So they were very surprised. But they went to both the lockers and they searched the house also, they got nothing. And then they went back home after 6-7 hours.
Was your wife upset?
Well, naturally, everyone was upset. You are not used to this. You know, you had a 40 years of service at very senior position. And as far as what I understood about myself was that I was a respected bureaucrat. And that's why I became Secretary Disinvestment. That's why I became Chairman Tried. That's why I was for 7 years in the Power Ministry. So I was a respected bureaucrat. To be searched by DYSPs and constables is not a very pleasant experience. And for my wife also, it was not a very pleasant experience, but she was more scared than anything else, because she was not used to people entering her bedroom, looking at almirahs, looking for keys to the lockers, etc. And then going to the bank, because bank there are lots of people. And she knew most of the people in the bank. Those were our banks. And so she was embarrassed a lot.
Now, allegations of allowing Tata Tele and Arcom to migrate to USAL after waiving off the license fee was going beyond its mandate and helping the companies to profitability. That was one of the allegations that was made against you.
Let me explain.
If you enjoyed that, click up here to support us and down here to subscribe. Be sure to check out our older episodes and the other stuff we do, like Can You Take It, I Agree, panel discussions, comics and animations, and much, much more.